Hey, I'm David Siegel, and you're listening to A Shark's Perspective.
Welcome back, and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective. I'm Kenneth Kinney, but friends call me Shark. I'm a keynote speaker, strategist, a shark diver, host of this show, and your chief shark officer. Have you thought about the kind of decisions that will make or break your ability to lead? Success basically boils down to making good decisions. Easy to say, but what do you do when faced with terrible options, and not just riding on the good ones? In order to divide and conquer the world, if you will, it often means being able to decide and conquer. So I ask again about your own decision-making framework. What are the decisions that will make or break all leaders? David Siegel is the CEO of Meetup, the largest platform for finding and building local communities, the former CEO of Investopedia, the former president of Seeking Alpha, an adjunct professor at Columbia University, the host of Keep Connected podcasts, and the author of Decide and Conquer, 44 decisions that make or break all leaders. And on this episode, we'll discuss a leadership decision-making framework, leadership principles, the world's largest platform for finding and building community, combating loneliness, what Rebecca once said, and the WeWork roller coaster, events in person and online, debunking some leadership advice, pivoting your strategy, Mission Impossible Famous 44s, and a lot more. So let's tune into a Meetup decision maker with a shark who's here to swim and conquer on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. David, welcome to A Shark's Perspective. Would you please tell us a little bit about your background and your career to date?
Whoa, okay. Jump right in. Here we go. Probably not even as exciting as you, because I don't have a nickname of Shark. I'm just like plain old boring David Siegel. But background is I was an early employee at DoubleClick, which in the late 90s was the center of the internet bubble. When I joined, the stock was at 10, it went up to 200, then it went back down to 8. So it was a very exciting time to kind of start your career. And I also started my career in human resources, which is not very common at all. I remember the CEO of DoubleClick at one point said to me, "Hey, David, what do you focus on, in HR?" I'm like, "I focus on recruiting people. I focus on building great communication alignment in an organization, and focus on motivating managers and building great management processes." And he's like, "I kind of do the same thing." So that's when I decided, hey, become a CEO one day. So I made it my goal to become a CEO, and I worked through a number of different big corporate digital, always tech companies like 100 Flowers I was an executive in, and another place called Everyday Health. And I became the president of a company called Seeking Alpha, which is a large financial publisher. Then I became CEO of Investopedia. We sold that company. And then about 4 years ago, I became the CEO of Meetup when it was owned by WeWork at the time. And that is a very quick overview of my career.
Well, Meetup's 20 years strong now. So as Rebecca once said, in case anybody doesn't know, what's Meetup?
Very nice. So yeah,
I read the book. I told you.
I see that. So in the book Decide and Conquer, the opening story is a story of Rebecca Newman, where she presumably wanted to change the name of Meetup because she had never heard of it, even though we probably more people know Meetup than many Fortune 500 companies. And we are the world's largest platform for finding and building community. That's a pretty big deal. We have 60 million members worldwide in 200 plus countries. But the reason why I'm so obsessed with what we do is because Meetup's goal is to cure the loneliness epidemic that exists in this world. And 46% of people, not sometimes, not occasionally, but regularly feel lonely. And that's like a travesty. Meetup's goal is, how do we help people to find their people? How do we help people to be connected to other people? How do we cure loneliness for everyone in this world? And, that's what we do.
Why do you think people don't recognize it enough as a social platform? Because I, to be honest, when I first thought of it with Meetup, even getting ready for this, I don't know that I necessarily thought of it as a social platform before, but that's obviously what it is. And Zoom in a lot of ways is very similar. It's about bringing people together and making it a less lonely world. But I'm fascinated with the social side of Meetup. How does that sort of continue to evolve for you?
Yeah. So we are, quote unquote, the real social platform, getting people together in person. So what we like to say is we use technology to get people off of technology. And part of the reason why it's not considered, quote unquote, with Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and Twitter is A, we're a lot smaller. We have 60 million users, not a billion users. That's number one. But number two is they're all about online. They're all about using technology to keep people on technology so no one actually ever meets each other in person. And we're the opposite of that. So, we, because our focus is getting together in person, which was not easy during the pandemic, but we really differentiate ourselves. We've done all these different studies, something like 95% of meetup organizers feel like they positively impact people's lives. Different people have done studies and found that, the more people that use Meetup, the happier that they are. And Facebook, Instagram, it's kind of the opposite of that. So hopefully after this podcast, everyone will be thinking of Meetup as the best social network out there, because
Exactly.
that's what we are. We're legit and real.
Well, you have an interesting perspective because of your work with Meetup. Do you see anything in the tea leaves, if you will, about meetings and events and conferences going on that others may not recognize? You've got kind of a unique catbird seat into the social lens of events today.
Yeah. So first of all, at one point, Meetup was 100% in person before the pandemic. Then during the pandemic, it was, went all the way down to like 20% in person, 80% online. Today, we're back up to 82% in person, 18% online. So one, point I would share with you is that in person is coming back. Whether it's conferences coming back, in person, people are so desperate to get back out in person and to do things that we're seeing our registrations at kind of record numbers, our daily active user record number. It's kind of like 100 years ago in the 1920s was known as the Roaring 20s, right? And it's not a coincidence that it came right after the Spanish flu and World War I, where people were stuck at home and they just had this desperate desire to go out and do things. So number one, I would say is people's desperate desires to do things is enormous. Number two, though, is it's changing dramatically. People are going out and doing things near their homes. They're not as much going out and doing things where they work, especially people who work at tech companies. So we're seeing all these meetup groups, for example, springing up in like suburban areas, in more rural areas, because people are moving into those areas because they're not going into the office 5 days a week anymore. So that's been a fascinating kind of evolution where, in where I live in New York, there's an area, a beautiful area called Hudson Valley. And all these tech people are moving to Hudson Valley because they could work, they don't have to come in the office ever. And we're seeing groups springing up in outlying areas, an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, 2.5 hours from bigger cities. So that's an interesting trend that's happening. The last thing I would say around trends is that many of our groups are hybrid groups, meaning they're creating events in person and online. And I think that's the future. People are doing things in person and online. I don't think people had always talked about events being hybrid events, meaning the same event is going to be in person and online. That's happening a little bit, but what's more happening is events are being either in person or online, and the same kind of groups are doing both.
I can't imagine why anybody would not want to come into the city with the smell of even fresher urine on the subways today and the crime and everything going on.
Who doesn't love,
Exactly.
the beautiful smell in the New York City subway
No
system?
kidding. Well, I had the pleasure of reading your book, Divide and Conquer 44 Decisions That Will Make or Break All Leaders. Where in the world did you come up with 44? And what was the impetus to write this book?
So you want there's the made up reason for 44 and the actual reason for
The actual
44.
reason. Yeah.
Okay, because the made one is the made up one was I was 44 years old when I started Meetup, which is just total coincidence. The actual reason is because as I was writing it, it ended up adding up to 44 as I wrote the whole thing. I didn't like have a set number kind of planned out. And then when I did, I was like, well, I could change this to 40. It could be very biblical, 40 days, 40 nights, 40 years wandering the desert. I don't know, make it 50, nice round number. But we're like, let's just keep it however I started it.
Yeah.
There was no rhyme or reason or anything special to 44. In terms of the book, I also teach at Columbia University. I teach entrepreneurship and strategy. And I think many teachers tend to also love helping and positively influencing, the minds of leaders and of students, etc. So I think for many people that are professors, writing comes in very naturally to them. And kind of since I was very young, I've always wanted to write a book, even in my 20s, possibly, for ego reasons, which is not a great reason to do something. But, in thinking about like, what are the different incentives of why people want to do things? Maybe it's more immortality kind of thing. Book will outlast your grandchildren, read a book. I always want to write a book. And I have a lot of kind of leadership management philosophies that I've taken on through the years, but I did not want to write like a boring management book where like there's one concept, it's woven with 100 examples throughout the entire thing. And you go around to different talk shows and you say like the same one concept bit over and over and over again. That was very uninteresting. I wanted to write some kind of crazy roller coaster story of experiences. And then you learn management, decision-making, leadership principles kind of through this roller coaster of experiences. The problem was I had like a interesting career, lots of, some ups and downs and experiences, but finally I had the ultimate experiences as being part of WeWork. And WeWork was such a crazy experience that I literally birthed this book. I'm not kidding. In like 8 weeks, I basically wrote the entire thing because it's just like there's so many crazy experiences that happened in life, and I was able to take those. It was almost a form of therapy for me, honestly, of just like clearing my mind and getting it on paper. And then fortunately, someone wanted to publish it, so it worked out.
That's great. It's ups and downs, and then we work. And I mean, I'm not sure where that falls, if it was still up or still down. So
These days, WeWork is pretty down.
yeah, it's pretty down. As a leader now at the company you're in, when you hear other leadership experts and thought leaders and other CEOs, what do you think is some of the advice that people are hearing that you would, say most often challenge
Hmm.
as maybe not right or a little too glossed over? Because one of the
Hmm.
things I loved about the book, it was the roller coaster that you went through and stories that we all go through, but then a lot of people sort of package a lot of leadership stuff and it's too packaged and it looks like you've always been perfect and everything else. So I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are on now that you've run a company like this for 4 years.
Yeah, sure.
What do you hear that you can argue against in the market?
Okay. I mentioned this in the book, especially as about one of my failings, and I talk about a lot of mistakes and failings in the book. But I had always been of the philosophy that the best way to manage, and you'll hear this in 1,000 leadership books, is to empower your people, is to make as few decisions as you can, which I do believe, and try to get other people to make those decisions because they're closest to the reasons, etc. And you're constantly will read about CEOs that are overly directive and no one wants to work for them and they're not da 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 da, and it's a problem. They're micromanagers, don't micromanage, delegate everything, 1 minute manager, da da da. So constantly hearing about it, and I always led organizations that way, and I tried leading Meetup that way, and I failed miserably in the first year of being very empowering. And what I learned, and this goes in conflict with, I think, a lot of kind of management philosophy out there, which is it's extremely important to really assess the situation that you're in and potentially to take on an extraordinarily different approach to how you manage and how you lead, depending on whether you're, quote unquote, a wartime CEO or a peacetime CEO. And I think that more often than not, many leaders will espouse different philosophies, but reality, the right philosophy is extraordinarily dependent on the situation that you're in. And the best thing that you could do is actually not espouse a specific philosophy, but be versatile enough in order to quickly assess and then possibly completely change how you approach things. So in the beginning, I didn't tell people what to do. You figure this out. You figure that out. We're gonna figure that. And it was a mess. Everyone was figuring out different things in different ways, and there was not enough accountability. And then I basically turned into a kind of person, that leader I never wanted to work for, which is I need this done. I need this done by such and such date. If you don't get it done, it's going to be a problem. And then things started like really moving, and then I saw that I got more directive and even more directive. I was like, wow, I was never this type of a leader. I hated those leaders, but it worked really well. So that's an example, I think, of just the need to potentially throw out a lot of the advice that you've had in the past and just really try and see something else that may work totally differently in the past.
Yeah. Well, and I love the fact that you do a lot of in these decisions, you do challenges and decisions, and you weave that through the timeline, whether it's 0 day or first 30, 60, 90 day. I love that as you build it up. But let's go into some of these decision six. So with rebuilding Meetup, you talk about communicating and committing to your leadership philosophy. And one of those sadly being what some would consider controversial, at least to your team it was, and that was revenue. So it sounded like many of the team weren't interested in enough or understood the need that a lot of leaders don't push for that, as you just said, and that's revenue to keep the lights on. Talk a little bit further about how
Yeah.
communicating and committing to that in order to keep the lights on for the rest of the people that wanted to be, say, emotional versus pragmatic. Because I think this is a common problem that we're starting to see across the board on a lot of news channels all the time today.
Absolutely. So especially among tech companies, especially
Oh,
with
yeah.
people who would probably call themselves highly progressive in nature, which many tech companies are, but not all. You will see this anti-revenue, anti-business, anti-Wall Street kind of mentality that seeps in. And Meetup was that. Meetup was all that, like to the extreme. I think if anyone mentioned that they had ever voted for a Republican, for example, and I'm not talking about my personal opinions or anything, then they wouldn't even be able to have been a Meetup
You
employee.
didn't
It was
have
just
pictures of Gordon Gecko up on the wall either.
no,
Yeah.
the opposite. So when I got up for everyone and I said, emotional intelligence is very important. Everyone was like, yeah, mission is very important. Yeah. And I said, revenue is very important. They're like, boo. So I said, listen, we can't succeed as a company unless we are making a profit and driving revenue growth. The company was losing $20 million a year. They were spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on Christmas parties and holiday parties and barbecues every Friday and just tremendous amounts of waste. And I said, I connected revenue to our mission. I said, revenue gives oxygen to our mission because I knew so many people deeply believed in building community. And it wasn't just revenue makes David Siegel's pockets heavier because, we get higher bonuses because no one cared. It was more revenue can make our mission more successful. If we want to build community for, hundreds of millions of people, that's more of an impact, building more of an impact than if we do it for 10 people. And what happened is, what was great is that all those people that were really anti-revenue, anti-business, they made a fuss and then ultimately they quit and they left. And they were frustrated with a new CEO coming in and talking about the business concepts like ROI and revenue and all these other things. But ultimately, it was a good way to actually get the right people on the bus. And we had a lot of people leave in the beginning because they wanted to work for a company that was like a nonprofit kind of thing. And I thought, no, that's not what Meetup's goal is. So it was a very stressful time period. And I literally looked at myself and said, wow, you used to be like this beloved CEO that on Glassdoor, everyone gave like super high ratings. And now it's like, I was looking at Glassdoor and I was like, oh my God, people really don't like me a lot. And that was hard. It was very hard because I was the kind of person, probably more so than now, that really did want to be liked. And again, it goes with the process of being more directive and doing what's right for the company, not just what's right for, each individual person. And it was a process, but now we are growing revenue as a company, growing double digit. And what's great about it is that, we had 250 employees when I started. We have 80 some odd employees now. So a lot less. And we're doing like 3 times the amount what we did back then. And growing revenue faster now with a third the number of employees. So it's a good thing.
Amazing. All right. So later on in challenge 13, you deal with something that most businesses, at least in my opinion, completely fail with today, and that's transparency.
Oh,
And leaders constantly feel like they should be more transparent and they're trying to massage and manage the message. But you say communicate directly. Unpack that meaning, if you will, please.
sure. So here's the thing. You gain a lot more. The number one thing to try to focus on in building for your team is trust. If your team trusts you, you have everything. And the best way to build trust is through transparency. It's much more important to share problems, negatives, the good, the bad, and the ugly of things that are happening, because that's how you build trust, not just being some cheerleader talking about great stuff. So Meetup employees, before I joined, had never seen the company's financials. They didn't know the company was even losing $20 million a year. So it's not their fault that they were jumping up and down for big barbecues and 10% raises and things like that. It's not their fault. It's leadership's fault for not sharing that. So the job of us as leaders is to help to make the best decisions that we possibly can. Well, guess what? When you're transparent as possible and everyone has access to the same information and everyone has access to the same reports than they have now as I do as a CEO, then smarter decisions get made. Bad decisions get made when the salesperson only has access to sales information, the product person only has access to product information, everyone has their own siloed information, nothing's transparent, nothing's shared, the problems aren't shared. When you share a problem with a company of 100 people, let's say, that's 100 smart people that can help to work on that problem and to make it better. So I'm obsessed with sharing everything to such a degree that our legal team always gets nervous, our HR team gets nervous, and I feel like I'm not doing my job. Actually, if our finance, HR, and legal teams are not getting nervous,
Such a great point.
they get nervous, I'm happy because that means I'm really pushing the envelope on being open about everything.
Well, decision 36, I love this one, but what do you do when you're presented with all bad options? You said, hang on and hope a better one appears. Because I think a lot of people think they're going to come up with something good after, but elaborate, if you will, what you meant by that.
Yeah, I mean, what happened was at that particular time, we were in the middle of selling Meetup out of WeWork. It was during the pandemic, and there just weren't any kind of great scenarios. And a lot of times our job is to find the best worst case, the best worst scenario out there. And that's okay. Because sometimes there aren't great answers. And the solution is not, as a leader, not to make a decision or to just pray and hope, is to say, okay, there's 4 bad scenarios here. Let's just choose the best of the least worst one. So it reminds me of a quote by Winston Churchill, which I don't even know if I have in the book or not, but it's one of my favorite quotes, which is, democracy is the worst form of government besides every other form of government. And I think that's true. Like, I think democracy has a lot of problems, but it's also the best form of government of any other government. And I think sometimes a decision may be a terrible decision to have to make, but it might be better than any of the other decisions that you're faced with. And just make the decision. Don't wait. And don't be so optimistic that you're just completely not realistic about what's going on.
I loved it later in the chapter 9 when you talked about relying on your own mission. How did you balance what you determined was your mission personally with what it might have been the mission of the former leadership, the culture, the board, or whomever you might have had to answer to, or whoever the team had to answer to in the past?
Yeah, so if memory serves me, because I don't have the whole book as memorized as you do, apparently, which is amazing, by the way. Thank you for being so sharky.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure what you're referring to there is when the pandemic hit. And our mission was always about IRL, which stands for in real life, doing things in person. And we turned down thousands of people who wanted to organize virtual groups prior to the pandemic. We turned down millions and millions of dollars of people who wanted to pay us money to organize virtual groups. Well, once the pandemic hit, we said, what is our mission actually? Is our mission actually about IRL in real life, or is our mission about keeping people connected, keeping people away from social isolation, keeping people away from loneliness? And if that's our mission, then we need to understand that, and we need to pivot and allow for virtual events, because there's a difference between a strategy and a mission. You could pivot your strategy, but it's so important to really understand what your mission is as a company. And if you're pivoting your mission, well, that's fine. Companies can do that, but it should involve a lot of time and energy and discussions with the board, etc. So mission development is very, very important for a company, and it shouldn't be taken lightly. It took us over a year to kind of create Meetup's new mission. And we use that as an anchor kind of in all company decisions. And we use that as an anchor in terms of pivoting. And there's now been close to 4 million virtual events from zero, during the pandemic. And I think it's helped hopefully many, many people.
Well, and you describe it as a major pivot. So, I mean, that's,
yes.
That was
a major pivot.
A major pivot. So a lot of leaders don't know well how to relax, but you talk about it in the epilogue. So I'm just curious, how do you go about doing that as a leader today to kind of learn to relax and just be yourself?
Yeah. So I think, first of all, I think that you can't be a truly effective leader if you're not as much always yourself as possible. Um, I think that if you're having to put on a shield and try to pretend to be a different type of person in front of others, then it's short term. People will always find out the truth. It could be a moment of anger, it could be a moment of frustration, but the truth always comes out. So I think number one is, if you're as a leader, or just forget leader, as any individual person, having to pretend that you're pretending to be someone other than yourself, at work, find a different place to work, right? So I would say, in terms of taking care of myself, I'm extremely focused on um, physical health, that it positively impacts mental health and emotional health. So I probably at this point exercise 7 days a week.
Good for you.
I start in the mornings, I drink vast amounts of water so I'm not dehydrated. And then I just will usually do something, bike or run or play tennis, whatever it is that I try to do, waking up early. I try to get that out of the way, and then I'll go on my day and have energy. And those days that I don't exercise, I'm just so much more lethargic, and my mind is so much more unclear. And I think it's about just understanding, again, there are things that I mean, I hate to be so cliche about it, but the reality is that we're working to live. That's it. You're not living to work, right? And there were times, I mentioned in the book, that like things were really crazy, really insane. And I had vacations plans with my kids, or vacation plan with my family. And everyone said, okay, you obviously can't go. You're way too busy. I'm like, no. That's why I have to go, because like, we got to take care of yourself. I really believe in the leaders. Everyone needs to put the oxygen mask on, take care of themselves. And that's how you're able to take care of other people, hopefully around you. And if you're not, it's going to explode, and you're going to have a breakdown, you have a divorce, other things, will happen in life. And by strengthening yourself, you'll strengthen those around you. So I've always deeply believed that.
Well, we covered a lot of the decisions in the book, but were there any that we didn't cover that stood out to you that just jumped out as the most important or near important?
I mean, I tend to believe that probably decision zero is not talked about enough around the world, which is the importance of setting yourself up for success prior to even starting a job. And that your first day and your job is not your first day on the job. It's the moment you accept. It's figuring out what can you do in the week, the 2 weeks, the 3 weeks, the 4 weeks, even prior to starting that job, to make you successful. Who could you meet? What can you read? What information can you gather prior to starting a job to ultimately, be day one as successful as possible? And then as a manager, how could you enable a person to succeed by sending them information, by setting up meetings for them, as opposed to like people come their day one and they have nothing in their calendar. So I tend to be a strong believer in helping people to succeed way prior to their first start time. So that would be one.
Yeah. Well, a lot of my favorite meetups are when I go to the coast so that I can go scuba diving, particularly with sharks. But I ask this of all my guests, David, what is your favorite kind of shark and why? You're not going to find a lot of polluted sharks in the East River, but it might be one of the Shark Tank fellows. It could be whatever you want.
Oh, it could be any shark. Oh, okay. Because I don't know that much about actual sharks, though. When I was 10 years old, I went fishing in Cape Cod, and it was a pretty memorable experience. We actually caught baby sharks as a family, and that was really scary, because we're in a little boat and we're pulling it up, like the fish. I don't fish, so I don't
Rod
know
and
what it's
reel.
called.
Yeah.
The rod, exactly. And it was a shark at the other end, and we cut the line, made sure we're okay. But we were boating or moving her all around and getting all scared, and thought that the boat could tip over. So that was actually my first shark experience when I was like 10 years old. So I guess that'll be my favorite shark, and kind of teaching me that boats can move up and down. The waters could be, a little scary, but you know what?
And always throw them back.
You could always throw it back. You always can pivot. You can always find a way to take care of yourself.
There you go.
That'll be my shark story.
All right. Well, David, it's a special time in the show. Are you ready for the 5 most interesting and important questions that you're going to be asked today?
I'm ready.
Number 1, Columbia University or the University of Pennsylvania, your alma mater?
Ooh, this just doesn't get shared with Columbia University, but the answer is University of Pennsylvania alma mater. The college years were where I met my wife, and and so many of my best friends. So it's definitely University of Pennsylvania. I wear a Penn hat. I don't wear a Columbia hat.
Fair enough. All right. You wrote about 44 decisions. Let's talk about famous other 44s. NBA legend Pistol Pete Maravich or Major League Baseball's Hank Aaron?
Ooh, I'm gonna have to go with Hank Aaron.
Yeah,
Hank Aaron.
Yeah, I mean both Hall of Famers, but I mean the guy broke so many barriers, color barriers as well. It's unbelievable.
Exactly.
All right, number 3, a decision you wish you could do over today if you had one do over.
Ooh, okay.
Uber or Zillow?
Wow, my answer is Uber. My God, I wouldn't be on this podcast. I'd be owning an island had I actually.
Exactly. He'd be one of the sharks on Shark Tank.
I would be exactly if I took the Uber first employee of Uber, basically. Yeah.
All right. This may seem a little bit of a softball, but they did fill in the gap, so I'm going to give some deference to them. Meetups that are in person or meetups that are virtual?
Oh,
that's a T-ball. I know.
I love in person. I really believe in the energy that people have.
Then let's skip that one. I got a different number. I got a different one for you.
Great.
We talked a lot about missions. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about Mission Impossible. The original series with Peter Graves or the new one with Tom Cruise. You're old enough to remember, at least on, some cable station showing those.
I'm not a big Tom Cruise fan. What can I say? On a personal level, I just don't. He doesn't jive with me. So I'm going with the original.
Yeah, and that song. That was original, a great song. And it didn't rely on any good special effects. So, all right, number 5, and the most important question that you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread?
Cornbread, especially like warmed up with some butter in it. Oh, I'm a cornbread guy.
If you're going to have a meetup, you got to have some bread. So
you know what I love with cornbread? When they have little pieces of corn. Have you ever had this?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Cornbread. Oh, that's the best.
Absolutely. Throw in some jalapenos too. All right. So David, where can people find out more about you, get a copy of this book, meet up and keep up with what you're doing and more?
Thank you. Sure. So I would say follow me on LinkedIn. That's probably where I'm most involved. You can find David Siegel Meetup and you can find me there. Apparently, Shark had told me before we started that I'm on Books a Million and I'm on lots of different bookstores and on Barnes and Noble. But obviously you go to Amazon and get the book there. And for Meetup, I would say download the Meetup app, register for one event, go surfing, do a book club, whatever the heck it is. Join a group and meet your people.
Absolutely. David, again, thank you very much for being with us today on A Shark's Perspective.
Loving it. Thank you.
So there was my conversation with David Siegel, the CEO of Meetup, the largest platform for finding and building local communities, the former CEO of Investopedia, the former president of Seeking Alpha, an adjunct professor at Columbia University, the host of the Keep Connected podcast, and the author of Decide and Conquer, 44 Decisions That Make or Break All Leaders. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from our conversation with him. First, we sort of began with debunking some leadership jargon. A lot of preaching, if you will, comes from people coming in with a philosophy and pushing that through into that lexicon. In his mind, the right philosophy is being extraordinarily dependent on the situation you're in and being versatile enough to adapt. Not enough people can adapt well to the situations they're in. So I agree with the way he expresses it in the book, which is well worth the read. Second, there's a trend out there today that you often see where many employees at companies are very anti-revenue, anti-business, anti-profit in attitude, and it's hard as a leader to realize that not everyone is going to support your mission. You need to overly explain to people that, as he said, revenue gives oxygen to a mission. And you're not going to convince everyone, and it's painful for leaders who are overly worried about being liked. It's fair to the employees and to them, if they don't agree with you, to show them what your mission is and then let them decide if they want to stay with you or leave the company. A lot of times it's just reminding you to get the right people on the bus, and it won't necessarily be all of them. Painful but best way to move in the direction you as a leader have to take a business. Be strong, transparent, and fair, and you'll gain a lot more trust that way as well. Third, maybe they got away with it before, but leaders don't need to pretend to be who we think they are. Not enough leaders are strong inside. Their life is a mess or too much loneliness, too many divorces, too many sacrifices for what really matters. Drop your shield and don't pretend to be anything else than who you really are. As he reminded us, focus on yourself, strengthen yourself, and that will strengthen others around you. Sounds easy enough until you end up being that guy or that girl that's a leader that no one can stand or no one wants to follow. Don't live to work, work to live. Take care of you. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you again for the privilege of your time, and I am so thankful to everyone who listens. David talked about his 44 decisions. Well, decision one for me is to jump in the water and dive deeper, and then join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.